If you heard Amy's story last week, you would know that this beautifully normal person should be a whole lot more messed up than she actually is. And the truth is, she was very broken in ways that you can't even imagine sitting here looking at you. Like to escape from a full-blown cult when you're 21 years of age, to leave behind everything of your life, every foundation, everything that connected you to other people, to leave that behind. You don't walk out of that without some baggage. So this week, as Amy and I have been wrestling with how to take her story and God's story and how do we bring them together, the thing that I think surprised me was how much your story is mirrored in so many lives here. Not the cult bit, but for you, it's been almost impossible to trust again after your trust was so abused. And in Matthew chapter 13, Jesus puts two very, very short stories together, back to back. He makes them a little pigeon pair. And at first glance, when you look at these two short stories, it's almost like they're the same, just little mirror images of each, but they're not. They're actually very different. And what amazes me in these two stories are actually the two halves of your life. So we're just going to read these two short stories for a sec. It's Matthew 13, 44 to 46. And the first one is, the kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in a field. When a man found it, he hid it again, and then in his yippee-ha-hoo joy, right, he went and sold all he had and bought the field. In that story, the man was not looking for the treasure. He found it accidentally. And Amy, you didn't know you were looking for Jesus because you didn't really know anything about Jesus. And the treasure you found was almost accidentally, but you found Jesus. And you left everything. You sold, in a sense, exchanged everything for Jesus. Second one. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant looking for fine pearls. When he found one of great value, he went away, sold everything he had, and bought it. This one pearl of great price, he found by constant searching. He was looking. It wasn't by accident. And in these two stories that Jesus tells, the two characters are not the same. In the first one, Jesus uses the word man, which is interchangeable for woman. It's generic. It's used over 600 times in the New Testament, talking about men and women. But the second is the word merchant. This character is a merchant. And that word is only used once in the whole of the New Testament, other than a couple of times in Revelation. Words matter. Jesus poked little words in there because they meant something, especially to those he was speaking to. And words are really important. And when Jesus describes this man as searching for fine pearls, the King James uses the word goodly. It's a really important word Jesus uses because it's a goodness that inspires, it motivates others to embrace what is beautiful and praiseworthy. It's not just, oh, that's a pretty little pearl. There's something in this that motivates others to want to actually go down the same path and search and find something of incredible value that you can have. And I believe this morning, as Amy shares the rest of her story, that's going to be your experience. That you're going to be inspired, you're going to be motivated to actually do something really noble and trust God again. To trust his bride again. To go deeper in your passion for what God has for you. To leave behind other things and find what is so precious in God's kingdom. So Amy, take us back to 14 years ago. You told me that people in a cult don't know they're in a cult. So when did you find out that for 21 years of your life, you were controlled by cult leaders?
Good morning, everyone. For those who heard last week, it ended with me leaving. I set a date and I, had to speak to my parents, and I actually emailed my friends as a way to try and give them a space that they could contact me, because I knew what was ahead, and it didn't work. I didn't hear or see any of my friends ever again from that moment. I won't go into the details, but it was a miraculous month, actually. And by the end of the 1 month, my entire immediate family, so my older brother, my parents, and my 2 very young sisters, actually ended up leaving, which was, it's their story to tell, but it's a miracle, and everyone saw it as that, and something that only God, who's a God of the detail, could have lined up. But here I am. I've left this cult and everything behind, and I didn't know what to do next. I'd never set foot in another church. I knew nothing about other churches, and I felt alone, I guess. My family got involved in very quickly. When you leave this cult, you get this new label of an ex-BCFer, which is, there's a lot of us. So you find out, and we had people contacting us for various reasons, and a lot of people find a lot of comfort and hope in what's called unorganised religion. I'm not sure if anyone's heard of that before. But essentially, kind of like home churches, but just anything away from any kind of systems, organised churches, any kind of leadership, and that's a place they feel safe. And I thought for a while that maybe this is where God was leading me. And it felt safe to an extent, and it helped me process a lot of things. But pretty quickly I just felt this familiar thing pop up, and I just really felt that it was just becoming another us versus them attitude. And I felt, okay, I've left this place, but now I'm a part of something different, starkly different, but it's still, I didn't feel free. It was this us versus them attitude. And back to your question, I think it was at least 3 or 4 months after I left that I realised that I was in a cult. Easily 3 or 4 months. It took a long time. And with that came a lot of confusion and hurt, and it's been a huge process.
So did you start going to other churches? What happened then?
Well, The answer to that is that God spoke to me and he said that he would restore everything I had lost in leaving the cult and following him. And at this point in time when he said that, I had no friends outside of this place. I had no idea what my future, which had been set out for me, was going to look like. And after I realised I was in a cult, and after dappling in, unchurched, unorganised religion for a little bit, I went back to that promise because I was feeling God was calling me to something different, and I had no idea what that was. And like he promised, every single university placement I went on for my speech therapy degree or job that I had, he arranged for me to meet these beautiful Christian friends who I'm still friends with every single one of them today, but they all came from different churches, and of course they were like, ooh, our goal is to get this girl to church. So I was constantly being invited to churches, and I went along, and I hated it.
So why? Okay. Why did you hate that experience of going to a church?
The instant I walk into a door, it didn't matter which church it was, I tried, I'd go with my friends every so often. Everything triggered me. So as you walk in the door and the seats are all facing the front, well, that looked like the church I'd grown up in. The cameras that stand behind and the stage at the front and the tithe and the offerings and the songs and stand up and sit down and the prayers and the sermon, it was the same. And those things, although it seems silly, were extremely triggering for me, so much so that I would physically shake in my seat at every service. And during the week, if I had been to church, I would be having panic attacks. I physically couldn't do it. And my friends didn't understand, and that's okay. And there was a bit of shame in that I couldn't go to church, but I kind of, over maybe the first year, I was able to go maybe once every 2 months. And then I'd go through a series of recovering, and then the desire to go never left, and I'd try again and keep going through that process.
Because when I said, I know your story's a little extreme, right? We haven't all grown up in a cult, but if you've ever been hurt or damaged in church life, it can be hard to walk into another church because people do the same thing on so many levels as the church that you've been part of. And I think every community has people who have been hurt in church life. I think Bairnsdale actually has a disproportionate number of Christians that still love Jesus but struggle to walk back through the doors because of what you just described. And I know that some of you are watching online today, that you love being part of it, but it's hard to walk in the doors. Yeah. Keep going.
But underneath it all, I had this pull to come. And God was not done with me. He took me over the last 14 years. He has taken me on this discovery of the treasure that I uncovered in the first parable, which has been more than just a single treasure. It has been this treasure cove. And he has spoken to me, he's shown me things, he's changed the way I see his kingdom. And I'd love to share some of those things.
Because as you hear what comes next, you'll find that story of the pearl merchant, the merchant in the time Jesus is describing was someone that was an expert in their field, and they are searching for something they've never really found yet. And you're going to find there's a story through your story of the searching for something you haven't yet found, and it has such beauty and value. And the merchants back in those days were very skilled at what they did. they were had a lot of resources. And in your story, you keep building resources. Your friendship base builds, doesn't it? And you gather other little pearls along the line. So tell us more.
So by around this time, I'd finished university, started work, and life was full. I had wonderful friends, like God had promised. I had a job which was going really well. I was happy, but I was broken. I started getting some counselling on and off, which was really, really helpful, but it did not get me to a point where I could go to church. I got involved in some street ministry because I thought, well, I can't go to a church, but I'll go and serve with, other Christians away from a church building. And I did that for a little bit, but even just having a leader, a Christian leader, frightened me no end, and I ran. I could not stay and even do something like that. Meeting Luke was another hearing from God moment. My friends had been saying to me, if you want to meet someone, you've got to come to church, you've got to be known, which, don't say that to me. Do not tell me to go to a church and be known. That triggered me, and I said, no, if God has someone for me, he will provide. And it was. God told me one morning, please go to this church, and I went, and at that church they advertised their young adults retreat, and I felt God say go, and with that came the courage to go, because otherwise there was no courage to go. And I went, and that's where I met a friend who introduced me to Luke. And Luke is a gift from God to me. He himself, he has his own story, and he met Jesus outside of a church. And for him, he had no obligations and no hang-ups about churches, so he was a fantastic sounding board for me. And it never was a problem for him that I couldn't go to church, and he was okay with that. And didn't impact his faith or anything like that.
There's something that, as Amy and I have been preparing for this, there's something I noticed that, Amy, you keep using these words, that God spoke to you. And we can overuse those words in church life. It can be a throwaway word. But when you hear and understand your story, those words are really, really important and really powerful, because in the cult, you couldn't hear from God. Only those leaders could hear from God. You had to take whatever they said, because you, as an individual, it was impossible for you, a lowly little pleb, I didn't mean that personally. No, I know, but not someone in leadership. Okay, only the leaders were allowed to hear from God. And so I've been amazed at some of the things that you've heard from God that have become reality. So keep telling us, sharing with us.
Sorry, Lex, you have to scoot me along if I'm taking too long.
That's okay.
Okay, so God is doing a lot. I'm hearing from God. He's leading me, but I still cannot go to church. It is extremely hard for me. And not too long after Luke and I got married, we decided to go on a missions trip together to Cambodia. And he absolutely loved it. He thrived in that environment. It was extremely difficult for me. We had a team of Christians and a Christian leader, and I just was in fight-flight the whole time, just because of my past. And on this trip, something went wrong. It was a medical missions trip. We were out in the middle of nowhere, and I actually ended up getting 2 cross-blood finger prick injuries, needle prick injuries with someone else's blood on it. And that's not okay. That's not okay when you're in the middle of Cambodia and there's a high prevalence of AIDS there. And so this team, which we had doctors in our team because it was a medical missions trip, they said, we've got to get you to a place where we can find this medication, and you have to have it within 48 hours to avoid the risk of contracting AIDS. And I was I was like, what is going on? And so they were calling everywhere, all over the world, sending prayer requests back to America and Australia. And they thought that the closest place they would find this medication for me would be in China. So, they're like, pack your bags, we're going to put you on a plane, you're going to send you to China. And I was scared. But the thing that was frightening me was that how was this going to impact on me becoming a mother? We can all go through life and we go through things, but that was the one thing sticking with me. And Luke and I had decided we wanted to have a family, and we were going to start for that when we got back. And I cried out to God, and I said, God, please give me some comfort. And he spoke to me. He actually gave me the date of when we would have our first child. And that gave me the comfort I needed. And the story doesn't end there. So the next morning we wake up ready to go on to fly to China, and one of the doctors said, I've heard overnight there's been these prayer chains and everyone's been calling around all over the world, and we have found that there is a doctor, an old English gentleman doctor, just 2 hours from here. He's been working in this town in Cambodia, and he illegally has 1 dose of the medication that you need. He's actually retiring this week, and he's just about to move back to England, but we're putting you in a taxi and we're sending you there. And I was like, wow, God. And that was the best day of our trip. Luke and I jumped in this taxi and we went to this town and got the medication that we needed, and then we stumbled across this cafe in this town in Cambodia, which was run by Christians, and it was actually a Christian outreach cafe run by and supported by a church 15 minutes from where we lived back in Brisbane. And I could just see what the Holy Spirit was doing. And I could not, I'm still terrified, Lex, okay? But I could not deny God working in his people. These were all things that were out of my control, completely out of my control. And not only did I see it in the medical missions team and that doctor who found this gentleman stayed up all night, calling whoever she could and praying and sending prayers out. And then when the Holy Spirit revealed where we were going to find this medication, and then we went there, that's pretty good, but God doesn't stop there. Finding this cafe, it spoke to me. It softened my heart, and I was getting glimpses of God's kingdom at work. Keep going.
Yeah. It's the pearl, right? She's gathering pearls. You watch her story. She's gathering fine pearls. She's looking for pearls. She's searching, and you're finding little glimpses along the way. And you're discovering Christians all around the world working together from different churches. And the word pearl does not exist in the Old Testament. It's not there. And Jesus takes a non-Jewish concept of something that is valued by the Gentiles, the Romans in particular, and takes this thing and uses it to talk about, this is what the kingdom's like. This is the kingdom. This is the kingdom. And I'm amazed in your story how there's a searching and you're finding pearls, but you're looking for something even beyond that.
So we get back to Brisbane, and after 4 months I'm cleared. You have to go through this series of tests. I was cleared of anything. And then Luke and I thought, okay, we'll start trying for a family. And after a few months, I found out I was infertile. And that broke me. But what I remembered and what I just went back to and held on to was that, no, God spoke to me in Cambodia. And the goodness of God is beyond anything that we can imagine. He knew. I thought I was crying out to him about this little hiccup that we had in Cambodia, but he knew that soon we would find out that we couldn't have children naturally. And he knew that I would need a promise to hold on to. So I did not have a concept or an understanding or a faith to ask for healing. But God also knew that about me. So we started on fertility treatment, and it wasn't easy, and there were hiccups along the way. But the date that God gave me was the date that we fell pregnant. And his goodness is Sorry, I'm getting a bit shaky now. So even in our journey of becoming parents, God, I had other desires in my heart about what that was going to look like and how that was going to play out, which were from God. And through that, he kept connecting me in with these Christians. And I would, again, for Luke's work, we had to go to a church, and then I met this beautiful woman who turned out to be the pastor's wife at this church, but she spoke to me about becoming a mum, and the point to this is that God kept linking me back in to other Christians, and I still cannot go to church legs. I can go, I can walk through the front door. I'm probably not shaking anymore at this point. Depends on what they preached about. But I will not become a part of a church. I will not join a serving team. I will not put any money into that church. I'm still broken.
And you described it as you wouldn't give a church your approval.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So for me to put money even into the tithe box would be me putting money into a system that I don't trust, and I'm not going to do that.
And you started a mums group as well, didn't you?
Yes. So during COVID...
Because you loved COVID, didn't you?
I loved COVID, I'm sorry. I loved COVID. I did not have to go to church.
Yes. No, stay
and
away
everyone
from that,
wasn't going, so it was fantastic. Sorry, it's a bit insensitive, but it's true. I had this moment of reprieve where I wasn't having to go through my thought processes and the battles in my head as to whether I was going to brave church that week or not. Anyway, while I was at home during COVID, God spoke to me again, and he showed me a vision of our garage, and we lived in this little house in Brisbane, and he said to me, I want you to do it while you're on COVID and you're not going anywhere. Do up your garage, because I want to send some mums along, and it's going to be a mums group. And I said, okay. So I started doing up the garage, and I was keen just to do it on my own. If, God's spoken, I'm obedient, this is great. But no, he asked me to link in with our local church, which was actually at the end of our street, this church. And I had to take a step of obedience, which I did not want to do. And I got in contact with the youth pastor, the children's pastor there, and she was really excited, and she said, there's these mums in our church and they're crying out for community, and my house was at the end of the street, so those are all local mums, and God sent them along, and for 2 years we had this flourishing mums group, which kept going till the day that we moved here.
So you're starting to trust God, you're taking little steps out. You also have a capacity to trust God for your finances, don't you? Do you want to tell us a little bit about that and the camper trailer thing? Yeah. So
money was a big thing for me growing up in the place that I grew up in. Just to set the scene, it's a very wealthy church. It's everyone there is middle class, and
when you say church, you mean cult, but we understand.
Cult. The cult. Yep. It was very middle class, and everyone had quite a comfortable amount of money. And so I had never seen, and we tithed, and there were offerings and atoning for sin, and which involved finances. And I hadn't seen it done any other way. So this was something that I did, I cried out to God about, and I just felt that there was something more that I wasn't seeing. And so he spoke to Luke and I. Firstly, he spoke to us about having the faith that I would be a stay-at-home mum once we had children. So this is back before we have kids. And at this point, I'm working as a full-time speech therapist. Luke had been working as an electrician, but by the time we were dating, he had walked away from that career and chosen to go study youth work, and he was working at the car wash. So, and that's his story to tell, and then he had also built a house. So we had this house, we had this mortgage, I'm funding it with my income, and Luke is planning to become a youth worker. And God spoke to us about, can you trust me that you can be a stay-at-home mum? And so we explored that with God, and we asked him to show us how. And he spoke to us about something I did not want to hear about, and that was that we needed to start tithing. And that was his personal... I'm talking about what God showed me. So he showed me that that tithing wasn't about a percentage, and tithing wasn't about doing the right thing or atoning for sins or anything of that matter, but that tithing was about trusting God and entering into his kingdom, and this upside down kingdom where he says, if you give, I can bless others and yourself. And so we started tithing, but I had a stipulation for God, and that it would not be at a church. So we tithed to Christian organisations or to individuals that we wanted to support, and still not a church.
Anything but a church.
Anything but a church. Yes. God is not in churches, no.
And you had a goal too within 5 years. Tell us that.
Yes. So God then spoke to me, and he said, in 5 years, you're going to be mortgage free. If you can trust me and plan towards being a stay-at-home mum, keep tithing, keep giving. It's not just the tithing, it's the giving. And that makes no sense, okay? Neither Luke and I are good with money. We're not savvy. We don't have investments. We didn't inherit anything. It was just step-by-step obedience to God. And within 5 years, we were mortgage-free.
So then you have this brilliant idea. Your family's out camping and you think, we need a camper trailer.
So I married Luke, and Luke is a camper. And he loves rugged camping, and I did not so much. And then we started having children, and I thought, you know what, I really want to, be a camper with Luke and do those things with my children. So I said to Luke, we need a camper trailer. And he wasn't so keen because he doesn't want to tow one. And I prayed about it. And God said, yes, you're to go find a camper trailer.
Don't you love it when God backs your ideas, not Luke's? Yeah.
Luke is wonderful.
So there's this one's advertised, right?
Yeah, so yes. I hunted on Marketplace, and I said, look, Luke, this camper trailer looks fantastic. Can we go look at it? And by this point, I'm painting a bad picture. He was on board. He was keen. And so he said, yes, let's go look at it. But we have no money for this $10,000 camper trailer. And I said, don't worry about it. I really feel like this is what God's saying. Let's go see it. We booked it in for a week later. And every day I went out to the mailbox and I'd peek in and be like, oh, there's no money in there.
You don't have the 10,000.
I have no money for it.
So you're looking in the mailbox for it each day. Let's have a go at that this week, eh? Who needs 10,000? Just go to the mailbox. It'll be there. Yep.
So it comes to Friday, and I look in the mailbox again, and there's nothing in there, and I'm like, okay.
So it's Saturday. You're going to look at it.
Saturday we're going. Saturday morning, and then I opened up my emails. And I had an email from my past employer who I'd worked for 7 years. And the email said, we have just realised we've underpaid you for 7 years. We're going to put $10,000 in your bank account this afternoon.
So that's Friday. Saturday you get the camper trailer.
So then Luke knows we're buying a camper trailer.
So take us forward to Bairnsdale, right? So you've arrived in Bairnsdale 2.5 years ago to Coolmatong because it's not to do with a church, but you find a community that for 50 years, people from different denominations here in Bairnsdale have been working together. And I see Chris's smiling face up there. And you've told me that Chris played a really big role in healing because he was a leader that you could... Will you explain? She was bragging on you, Chris, so we're just going to brag on you a little bit.
So in spite of everything that God is teaching me, I still cannot go to churches regularly. And by this point, I have little children, and I'm motivated because I want I want that for them on one hand. On the other hand, I don't know if I want it, but something in me is pulling, and I cannot deny that everything God has been showing me over the last, 12 years up to this point, He is real, and His goodness is real. And every time it always involved other Christians, and I had to be vulnerable, and He was softening me and healing me. But a big part of it is that I couldn't share that with my family, and I still can't to today. And I liked that I could hide behind Luke and his roles and his job in Brisbane as a chaplain and then taking the role at Coolamatong. But behind Luke was me, and I was very frightened. And so we arrive in Bairnsdale, and Luke took a role at Camp Coolamatong. For those who don't know, it's a Christian-run organisation. And what is special about Coolamatong is that it involves people, and has done for 50 years, from all churches, from all backgrounds, and there is this beautiful demonstration of God's kingdom, and that felt safe for me. I felt I could spread my allegiance a little bit and not put a stamp of approval on anything. And it was still outside of a church, so that helped. And Chris was probably one of the first Christian leaders I had gotten to know who he was very kind and gentle and very open to me and my questionings if I was uncertain about something. And that was really healing for me. And just the way he led as a leader, and the way he cared for those around him, and didn't have big, strong opinions, but trusted God in each of the moments that he had to make a decision on. But I still cannot go to church. And we've come along to Bairnsdale, and with Luke's role, we had to visit all the churches each year with the interns, which was good. It was good that we could do that. And the hardest part of moving for me was the facing the fact that I had to find a church. Because, we're a Christian family, we're working at a Christian organisation, I'm starting to mentor these interns, I'm meant to be a good Christian girl who can go to church. But that's not me.
And you were actually traumatised by the fact that you had to take weekly Bible studies with the interns, and you were terrified that anything you said, if it was not quite right, will you lead them astray like you had been led astray yourself? So just go past that for a sec, because for you to be sitting here today is a humongous breakthrough, right? But tell me about your search for a church, because that was traumatic for you, wasn't it?
It's extremely traumatic for me. I guess in Brisbane we had settled on a local church, and it was comfortable. I was running this mums group. We would go maybe once or twice a month, but we weren't doing anything else, and there was no expectation. Once we arrived here, again, just having to enter into a church, and no one likes this. No one likes having to go to a church with their little analytical brain on and go like, is this the church for me? Is this not the church for me? Like, it's a very uncomfortable place to be in. And so it brought up a lot of things. It brought up a lot of fears. It brought up these unrelenting, annoying fears that I just could not get past. And honestly, by this point, I'm like, if nothing God shows me about His kingdom can help with these fears, then nothing's going to. Like, I think I'm just going to be damaged goods. And we ended up settling on a church that felt, for me, the safest. Luke wanted to go somewhere else.
Redgum.
Luke wanted to go to Redgum. But that was the last church I was going to go to.
So why? Hang on. Amy, my friend Amy. Why did you not want to come to Redgum?
Well, even before we came, someone,
Amy Stork.
Amy Stork, who worked at Coolamatong at the time.
And was in Redgum.
And was going to Redgum, excitedly grabbed Luke and I and said, we know we're searching for a church. Come along to Redgum, because the pastor there has something that is different from everywhere else, and you're going to love it. And that was just the biggest red alarm bells that anyone could have ever said to me. And I said, well, thank you for telling me which church not to go to. I will not be going there. And we had to come to Redgum with the interns, and not had to, but we came along. And Luke loved it, and I did not. I found Lex's personality a bit much.
I terrified you, didn't I? I did. I made you run.
You did.
Yeah.
You did.
Coral did that for 3 years, but I caught her.
And so we chose somewhere else, and it was safe. But the hunger was growing, and I had seen, God has shown me things, and I've seen things, and I just wanted more of His kingdom.
And that's that pearl. I think this through the story is this searching and longing for something more. You're gaining precious things, but there is a pearl of great price out there, don't you?
Mm-hmm. And what I wanted to be free. It's not about a church. I wanted to be a free citizen in God's kingdom, and I felt like I was a prison. I felt like a slave in God's kingdom. Yes, He could show me revelation and breakthrough in all these different areas that I've spoken to you about today, but in reality, I was terrified, and I wanted to be a free citizen. I was very, very envious of anyone who seemingly could just go to church and be a part of Christian organisations and be blissful about it, but that was not me.
So how did you end up here?
So we had to visit again, and something about the sermon caught me. And it was like...
Was I speaking?
Lex was speaking. And it was like... Do you want your moment?
Everyone wants to listen to you, but I've got to be quiet for them to listen to you, so, okay.
It was like what I heard was from Lex when he was speaking about the kingdom of God. And for the first time, it was like he was talking about everything that God had been showing me over the last 14 years. And I just was like, wow, like he's speaking of these treasures that God has shown me, and I know are true. And I was so drawn, and I wanted to hear more. I needed to hear more, because for the first time I was excited and intrigued, and it drew me. And there were actually other things that helped. I said that Redgum was triggering. That's just because it's a church, right? And certain personalities, and because something that Amy had said. But there were actually things at Redgum that did help allay some of these fears. And, just things like not passing around the tithe. And that intrigued me. I was like, why aren't they doing that? Just the fact that it's not a wealthy church, and that it's full of misfits, and I could fit into that.
But you had a scheme, didn't you?
I had a
scheme. What was your scheme?
So I said, and Luke really, really wanted to come. And I said to Luke, Luke, we'll go, but first... No, I didn't say we'll go. I said, first, can we have Lex and Coral over for dinner? Because I need to suss them out.
That's why you went for dinner.
And so we did. And I was very, very pleasantly surprised. And I don't think I asked you any wonderful questions that night. I don't know, maybe you knew exactly what I was doing, Lex. I haven't asked you.
I have no clue about most things, no.
No, I just wanted to get to know them. And I loved the way Coral was warm. I loved the way Lex honoured Coral. And I particularly loved that I could talk to both of them about God and the God that I knew. And they got it. And I felt like these people have lived this a lot longer than me, and I want to learn.
You told me that at the end of that night you breathed a sigh of relief that I was not as weird as you thought I was.
Yeah, I said to Luke, tonight we're going to find out if this is a cult.
Yeah. So we've ticked that box. Then in your little brain you came up with another way to keep yourself safe.
Yeah, so Luke's cheering. He's like, sweet, we get to go. And I said, yes, we will go, but for 3 months. I need an out. I desperately needed an out. I needed to know that I could tap out if I needed to.
So jump forward, you've been hanging around us for a while, and then just before Christmas, you did something you've never done in your whole life. What was that?
So about 6 months ago, we'd been coming, it was probably within that 3-month period, the probation that I gave you all. And I was standing at the back and God spoke to me and he gave me a vision and he said, I want you to buy a bus for Redgum. And we had a little nest egg. We don't have lots of money. That's not what I'm saying. But I by this point, I've learnt to hear God's voice. And what is special about God's voice is that it brings the grace and the confidence and the ability to obey. And so this is something that I have sworn never to do and that we would never, ever, ever put money into a church, let alone, a substantial amount. And that I'm essentially putting my approval and getting vulnerable, and that was not easy, but he was very clear about it. And so I took that to Luke, and I said, Luke, you pray about it, because I've learnt by now that if it's God, he will move on Luke's heart. I don't need to do that. So I said, maybe I'm wrong, but you pray about it. And so Luke did that, and it took us a good few months to pray about it and wrestle with it, and for me to take some very deep breaths and realise what that meant for me. And the shame that I felt in doing that, because I essentially had these allegiances to myself and my family that I was never going to become a part of a church, because that frightened my family, and it still does to today. And that was not an easy thing to do. But he spoke, and so he spoke to us. 3 months later, we were driving to church, and we're like, today's the day. We'll just get it over and done with, rip the Band-Aid off, go speak to Martin and Lex. And we walked up to speak to them after the service, and Luke had not even opened his mouth yet. And another gentleman came up and said, Lex, I've found a bus. We've got to get a bus. But I've only got half the money. And Luke and I are standing there like, well, we've got the other half. No one had said they needed a bus. No one had spoken to each other. I didn't even know the name of this gentleman. And Lex said that on the way to church that morning, he felt God say that you were going to get a bus that day.
Yeah, we had 3 things happening all simultaneously. On the way here, I just knew that we needed a bus, and I'm praying about this bus for Redgum. I walk in the back door, and a family come up and showed me a photo of this bus, and we got half the money. We want to buy this bus. You, at the end, come up with it, and within a week, the 25-seater bus that the youth use each week was purchased and was actually physically here, So, the capacity to hear from God is there for all of us. But we don't always see the dots, how he puts it together. And all this searching and searching and searching for this one thing, this one pearl, you still haven't found it. And then God speaks to you. Tell us what that is, and then we'll close.
So even after, in all honesty, even though I saw what God did that morning, and like, wow, God, like you're speaking, you're doing this, I wanted to run. I was like, that's it. I've given it. I'm out of here. Luke, let's go somewhere else to church. Like, I felt way too vulnerable. And so it was hard. It was so unrelenting. And at this point, I just said to God, okay, I get it. I accept it. This is just going to be me. This is me from now on. I will try my hardest to hear your voice, like to hear you and to be obedient, but I'll never be on a serving team. I won't help out with kids. I'm terrified for my children that I felt this huge weight of responsibility that Luke and I had to choose a church which we would bring up our children in, and I was so scared that I was going to repeat history with them and that they would get hurt. And so it was hard. I was tormented every time I'd come to church. And Coolamatong, it was hard running helping to host the Bible study. That was really hard for me. I was so scared of saying the wrong thing and leading someone astray or hurting them in their faith. Like, it was so hard. And I was crying out to God, and I just said, okay, this is just me. I get it. I'm starting to see your kingdom. I'm seeing your hand at work. I get that you love everyone and that we're here to help each other, but I've got, what I said was, I have this chink in my armour. And so the very thing that was drawing me to want to be in community, because the cult was very pushy about community, and that was a place that you were involved in and then you were vulnerable in, that's what frightened me. But there was always this searching and this wanting to be a free citizen in his kingdom. But I actually saw that as a chink in my armour. So anytime I felt a little bit of, I really want to be a part of this and get to know more people or be known, I'd actually just run the other direction, because I saw that as a chink in my armour, that was actually something wrong with me, that I wanted to be vulnerable. And that's something, I'm not sure if that really makes sense, but when it's something that's been stolen from you and abused and then shown to be false, when you, within 24 hours, lose this community that you've had for 21 years, and then that it's something that is encouraged in churches, it was just extremely difficult for me.
So how do you get to sit here today? How do you get to be part of this new leadership team we've formed? How do you get to do all this? What was the breakthrough?
So God spoke again, and he said to me, you are like a woman who has been in an abusive relationship. You will never unsee what you have seen or unfeel what you feel, and I'm not asking you to. But what I am asking is that you give me these things that you have collected, these pearls, because I've battled with, every time I'd come, I battled with, is this wisdom? Is this fear, or is this wisdom? Should I have my guard up? Maybe that's wise to have my guard up. And he said, can you give me that? Can you give me what you think is your wisdom? And in replacement, I will give you freedom. And I will give you peace. And in that moment, it was the first time he'd spoken to me directly about this issue that I was having. And peace came. He broke through. And that he said, I won't promise that you won't get hurt again. And I can't promise that your children won't get hurt. But what I do promise is that I will be with you in the hurt when it does happen. And that broke through. And the peace that came with that and the excitement that came with that was something that I had been searching for 14 years and had never been able to find on my own or talk myself into.
When God speaks to you personally, directly, it sets us free, doesn't it? And that's what the kingdom is really all about. It's when Jesus says, seek first the kingdom and right relationship with him. You've found this precious thing you've been searching for your whole life. And this pearl is something that's so precious to you because it's brought you the freedom from all the brokenness that you've carried. As I said, beautifully normal, right? Beautifully normal. But oh, what a story. So thank you, Amy.
Wow,
thank you, Amy. Really, let's just show appreciation for, hey? Yeah. I've been telling Amy, when you write your book,
more than that.
because her story is our story in so many ways. It's not just her story, and it's a story of God's kingdom and what you've found that's so precious in your family's life, you know. So.